It's like, okay, well, what if I wanted to kind of clean some of this up, right? We've been doing some examples here, and now I want to start cleaning some of this up so we can move on to some other things. It's like, okay, so how could I clean up some of this stuff? It's like, well, if you need to delete a folder, there's a command for that too, and that's the rmdir. So to remove a directory, you can make directories, you can remove directories. And just like the make directory, all that you really needed to do was to pass in what's the file path of the thing that you want to delete. All right, so let's say I want to delete that extra rice folder. Now I've got two of them. I've got one here on my desktop, and I've got one inside the James folder. It's like maybe I want to delete the one that's inside the James folder. I just want to have one that's James folder here on the desktop and a rice folder here on the desktop, and I don't want to have two rice folders. So it's like, okay, well then what's the file path? I could give the relative file path of James/rice. That's where it is from where I am right now. I could give the full file path. I could say tilde/desktop/James/rice. Either way, whichever way you want to get there, it doesn't really matter. All right, this command will work if you do the absolute. Remember, the command will work from anywhere on the computer. Doesn't matter where you are. But if you're not in this location, it becomes really critical to understand that. So from a relative file path perspective. So let's try it. I'll do an rmdir of that and say, okay, looks like nothing happened, but let's see, did it work? If I do an ls in my James folder, it's like, yeah, I got no results now. So using the rmdir command, that's a quick way you could go through and delete folders. All right. So this is some of the basics of learning how to move data around, getting some more practice with absolute paths as opposed to relative paths, understanding your file system, and becoming more comfortable with doing things you probably already know how to do with the mouse, but let's learn how to do them with the command line, especially for an operating system like CentOS. You're not going to have the option to be able to, sit there with your mouse and sort of figure things out intuitively. You're going to have to know the commands to be able to navigate the file system and do things that way. Also, I'd like to kind of toss in one little trick now that we've started to run a bunch of commands, and that's the history command. So if you've been doing previous commands, many times you want to go back and just sort of check what's been done on this computer thus far. And that's the history command. So the history command is a good example of something that when you type history, it'll show you, hey, these are the commands that have been run before you. All right, and so we can start to see now, here's all those commands. I just ran, 50-some commands thus far on this particular machine. All right, and so it's nice to be able to kind of go back and see if you know you successfully ran this command before, maybe just go and type history and take a quick scroll up through your history, and you'll be able to kind of see some of that stuff. Arrow keys will also work if you hit the up arrow. Right, so right now I'm hitting the up arrow on my keyboard, and that will also kind of go back. If you hit like up arrow and down arrow, you can kind of scroll up and down through your history. Another useful little trick out of history, because on an actual server, you could have hundreds of commands in your history, maybe even 1,000. On a lot of servers, the default is they'll store the last 1,000 commands that were run on that particular account. So it's possible you could have tons and tons of stuff in your history. And maybe just for an example here today, let's say you remember kind of previously how we did something like we CD'd to slash. Right, it was one of the first commands that we looked at was let's learn how to CD to the top of our file system. We did a CD to slash. Well, what if you wanted to run this command? All right, so realize there is a shortcut way that you can run a command out of your history. And that's by using the exclamation point and then the number of what command is this in your history. All right, so right now I've got a CD slash command that is command number 12 in my history. You'd have to check your history to see what it is in your history if you wanted to try this. But if you try here, the command just exclamation point and then 12, that will run whatever the 12th command is out of your history. All right, and so now when I check where I am, my PWD, it's like, well, it just ran the CD slash command, and here I am, now I'm at the slash location. All right, so another useful little trick to know is how can I run commands I've previously run out of my history quickly, especially you don't want to be sitting there for like an hour hitting the up arrow, and then like, did I go past it? I don't know, and then it's really frustrating to do that. Just type exclamation point and then the number of the command in your history. It's a nice little trick to know about. So, all right, so we'll continue in some future videos here, looking at some additional stuff that we can do to navigate our file system more, kind of continue around playing around with things.